Back in September of 9/11, I created a model called Paradigm for Peace. And it's intended to be used by foreign policymakers, whether in a U.S. Department of Peace or in Congress or by the executive. And it has 4 parts to it: the roots of violence, escalators of violence, solutions to violence, and the 4th part's a little different. I call it a quest attitude, a cooperative attitude of thought and dialogue. And in my large project called the Taxonomy of Peace, I run the Middle East-U.S. conflicts through the Paradigm for Peace model. I also run some other conflicts through the model: the U.S. Civil War, the Cold War, and World War II on the German front. But I'd like to just run through the 4 parts with you, but for purposes of this question, I'll just focus on the first part, roots of violence. Paradigm for Peace looks at the, is this down enough for you?
Yeah,
Put it down more? Is that better?
yes, thank you.
More?
Hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about the roots of violence. The Paradigm for Peace model looks at the defensive roots of violence. And by defensive, I don't mean that the violence is legitimate, but the motivation behind it is legitimate, or at least understandable. And the model looks at the aggressive roots of violence, in which somebody or a nation is illegitimately encroaching on another person's rights. And in practice, it can be hard to distinguish between who's being motivated for aggressive and who's being motivated by defensive reasons. But for foreign policy purposes, it doesn't matter. You just have to have a foreign policy that's comprehensive enough to address both the defensive and the aggressive roots of violence. I think some Americans are more aware of defensive roots of violence in the United States and aggressive roots of violence in the enemy. And some Americans are the reverse. They're more aware of our aggressive roots and the enemy's defensive. But this model looks at them all. So I divide the roots of violence into 8 categories. The first is life and safety. How does a threat to life and safety lead to violence? Okay, I'm an Iraqi. My door is being pounded down by American soldiers. They're screaming, they're waving weapons about, they're holding guns to my grandmother and to my children. I may use violence to protect my family's lives. The second category I look at is power and freedom. We are Egyptians, Saudis, Kuwaitis. It's 1991. We've submitted petitions to our governments requesting that they not join the U.S. coalition against Iraq. Our governments turn a deaf ear to us because they don't represent us. They represent the United States, who's bribing and threatening them to join the coalition against Iraq. We are enraged. We're so enraged we may use violence to topple our governments. The third category is wealth and possessions. I'm an Egyptian, middle class, but I'm outraged that 2/3 of Cairo is living in poverty. Our leader, Mubarak, does nothing to help them. Instead of directly giving them money, food, shelter, he caters to Western interests, to capitalism. He's building fancy luxury hotels. I am so infuriated, I may drive a plane into a World Trade Center tower. Values is the 4th category. It's 90 years ago. I'm an Egyptian. Ataturk is the leader of Turkey. He is imposing a program of drastic westernization upon the Turks. He's purposefully cutting them off from their Islamic culture. He's telling them what to wear, how they can have their hair. He's abolished the Arabic alphabet and imposed the Roman alphabet. Our new generation won't even be able to read the old literature. I'm going to start an organization called the Muslim Brotherhood. And our purpose will be to preserve our Islamic culture and community and identity. The 5th category, friendship, love, and worth. Of course, this one is completely neglected in foreign policy, and you never hear it spoken about. I live in the Mideast. I'm forced to go to the city to separate from my family to look for a job. Industrialization, urbanization, migration, overpopulation, these things leave me feeling lost and disconnected. I'm so alienated, like a flower without roots and sunshine. The alienation is so painful. I need to join a group of people who feel like me, other alienated individuals. And I found a group. They use violence. We're going to change society with violence. The 6th category, self-potential. We're Palestinians, Afghans, Algerians, Egyptians. We've done all our homework. We've graduated from high school, we've graduated from college, but we don't have a job, like so many of us. Not only that, we don't have a meaningful purpose in life. We have no noble purpose, no adventure. We're bored. Let's join the war against the Christian crusaders, and we'll protect our fellow Muslims. 7th category, joyful tranquility. This one, instead of giving an example, I'll just explain it. Even if the other roots of violence are satisfied, a person could still feel very angry and violent if they don't have a sense of inner peace. And this category also looks at the concept of play, the quantity and quality of play for children and adults. What kind of play do children engage in? Is it merry and joyful? Do you hear laughter? Or is it hostile? Is it about beating other people? Is it about rules and yelling? And the last category, truth. I'll paraphrase some words by the Dalai Lama, who said, all afflictive thoughts and feelings, all afflictive states of mind result from distorted perceptions of reality. If people and nations do not understand the full length, width, and depth of truth, they're much more inclined to violence and to believe that war is good. Because war makes sense only if you don't know the full truth. Now, that's not just an interesting academic analysis. The effect of it should be to see that once you look at all these roots of violence, you see, hey, war doesn't fix any of them. In fact, war makes them all worse. War aggravates the defensive roots of violence, and it aggravates the aggressive roots of violence, because many aggressive mentalities are spawned by the trauma of war. They thrive in war, and they're camouflaged by war. So the examples I gave you were largely defensive examples, but I look at also the aggressive roots of violence in the Middle East, and then the defensive and aggressive roots of violence in the United States. Very briefly, my time's probably... What's that? Oh, great. The second part is escalators of violence. I'll be briefer, though. I look at mental, legal, and physical escalators. Escalators are those factors which make it more likely that a person would use violence. Because we all have needs that aren't satisfied, but we don't resort to violence. But, for example, mental escalators are mental conditions that make a person more likely to react to negative circumstances with violence. They also include conditions in which a person makes a negative climate for others, like a climate lacking in love and truth. And it makes those people more inclined to be violent. Legal, an example of that would be black and white thinking or reduced empathy. Those are mental escalators. Legal escalators include laws and policies, or lack of laws and policies, that enable a person or nation to get away with being violent, or that encourage conditions of injustice that provoke other people to become violent out of frustration. An example of a legal escalator of violence would be the failure to impeach the president, as Dave writes about in his book. And then physical escalators are physical equipment, structures, finances that enable a person to be violent. Or it could be the lack of those finances and equipment that prevent somebody from defending themselves. And again, if you look at all the escalators, and there are many, many, many of these escalators, especially the mental ones, the vast majority of them, like 99% of them, you can't fix by war. Well, nothing can be fixed by war, but you can't even fix them physically. They need attention of mental attention, legal attention. And that gets to the third part of my paradigm for peace, which is solutions. We have a first facet of human development, which uses mental tools to promote peace. Second facet of justice, which uses legal tools to promote peace. And the third facet of physical control, which uses nonviolent or violent tools to promote peace. Now, the United States horrendously overuses that third facet. It neglects and misuses the second facet, and it's completely oblivious to the first facet. So we need an enormous shift from the third facet to the first and the second facets. And then the last part of the paradigm for peace, the fourth part, is the cooperative thought and dialogue. It's very, very important, because even if we had a U.S. Department of Peace, if it didn't have a positive culture within it of cooperation, you'd be getting turf warfare, intimidation, closed-door meetings, exclusions, people being fired, people retiring early because they disagreed. So you need to have a positive culture within the organization that hopes to create peace for others. Thank you.